Welcome to the Minding Your Money podcast. My name is Deb Howard, your abundant life coach.
And I am Love Pate, the anointed architect.
Thanks for being here again on today for our podcast. I am excited. I'm always excited about what we are going to discuss, and today is no exception. Are you excited, love?
I'm excited. I'm always excited to get on the stage with the abundant life coach.
All right, so let's get to it. I want to share with the listening audience. Last night, I watched Tyler Perry's, I think it's just kind of his biography on Prime. It's called Maxine's Baby. And he goes through which is an amazing video. I will recommend it because I really enjoyed it. But anyway, one of the things that came out in that storyline was how he developed the character of Madea. And he talked about how he was influenced very strongly because, and I didn't know this either, he grew up in Louisiana, that he was influenced very strongly by the matriarchal society or culture that we have, especially in the African American community here in the South. I just, I had never thought about it. And that, really the character Medea is a compilation, right, of all the women that were in his life that influenced him. And I started thinking about love. I really started thinking about this because I started thinking how my grandmother, God rest her soul, when she was here, was very influential in all our lives. Like my parents, our family, all my aunts and uncles, all her kids and their families. She was very influential. Even though I had a grandfather, her husband, he was the sweetest man. Oh, I still miss them. But she was obviously the head. There's like no doubt. She was the head. And she had been through a lot of things in her life. And so what she said really had an impact on the family. So I thought it would be good for us to kind of talk about that because I know a lot of people that listen to us are in the South. And even if you're not in the South, I'm sure you're familiar with some of the things that we're going to talk about, having that matriarchal influence in your family and how that really impacts not only just everyday decisions, but the biggest one, financial decisions.
Yes.
I thought about how my grandmother influenced financial decisions, right? Because she had a way of doing things. Not to say it was bad for her, but it wasn't right for everybody. But she definitely impacted that. And my grandmother had a third grade education, right? I think third, maybe sixth grade. She didn't get out of elementary school, right? She was on the plantation, so there you go. And so their understanding really of finances was limited.
Right.
And I think that's true for a lot of the Medeas and big mamas in that time, right?
Yes.
That they had a limited understanding of money, of finances, and yet they have so much impact. And I think that we are still seeing their impact in our lives. What do you think, love? Because I see it in my family for sure.
I will say that what I've had to learn is that our mothers and grandmothers had they could only teach us through their level of experience, right? So you said she had a third grade level. So how much up from, if you think from kindergarten to third grade, that she can really understand about building wealth, about managing finances? If you think about it, I mean, if you think about back that time, man, a dollar, you were a millionaire, right? And
Yes.
but I mean, as we got older, kids were excited about getting a dollar. And so I think that what we have to understand is they had such a great influence, but it was the responsibility of each generation to take what they gained, right, from the previous generation and pack on top of that the things that they're learning. But what happens is we have, I would say, stagnated ourselves because we just took the information and then we didn't ask why, we didn't explore or research, and we didn't add on to it. Because that's the importance. Yes, you are supposed to gain wisdom from those who came before you, but it doesn't just stop there. There's a responsibility of us to do the additional work. Because with each level of understanding, there is more work, right? So she can only give to your family, or my grandmother can only give to our family to the level of which she experienced. And then what she passed to my mom, it was my mom's responsibility to take what nugget she got, right? And
Mhm.
then build on that in order to give me a greater degree of understanding. It's like if they didn't get it and mom didn't get it, how are we supposed to get it? Right?
Yeah.
That's just my thought.
Yeah, no, I think right on, right on target. And I think the interesting thing is because I had never thought about this really prior to last night watching that movie. It's interesting because I realized that she was always in, I'm going to call it survival mode. Okay. She was always trying to make it, right? She got to a point where I won't say she was well off, but she was able to, pay the bills and all that kind of stuff. But her mindset was one of paying her bills. She was a woman of integrity.
Right.
And so she paid all her bills, even if it meant she didn't have food. There were times when she didn't have groceries. And I can remember my mom being upset about that. Why did you pay Montgomery Wards and not and not buy groceries, right? I mean, she really would do things like that. She would, if she had a bill, she's gonna pay that bill first. And her logic was, I'm trusting God. God is going to supply the needs. And of course, He did, right? I mean, we're faith based too. But at the same time, um, God will do that. But is that really a strategy for living? Yeah, that I don't, for me, it wasn't. But I saw my parents do the same thing, have
Right.
that survival mode living, right? We kind of stayed in survival mode. And for many years in my own life, right, I kind of perpetuated that
Right.
until I shifted. I mean,
Right.
it takes a hard shift. So, yeah, I think that's why it was so interesting to me because I did see that kind of cycle continue from the influence of grandmother. And you know what? It may even be unconscious. I mean, I don't think we all set out, let's do it just like she did it because that worked. I don't think anybody was thinking that,
I
but
think
that's how it happened. you know, I
yeah.
mean, yeah, what do you think?
So I think when you look at it, right? You know how they talk about the first few years of a child's life is when they soak up everything, right? Even when we think that our children are not um monitoring us, mimicking themselves after us, they really are. They are
Mm-hmm,
watching the things that you see in your children. 9 times out of 10, they can trace it back to something they've seen in you, right? Now it might have a little tweak on it, right? Because our kids have, today come up with very strong personalities.
mm-hmm,
However, they watch us. And I believe the word is calling us. That's why you have to be careful what we do because we are creating, right? Models of ourselves. So you have
mm-hmm,
to ask yourself when you look at your child, oh, did I this is what I created, right? So I
mm-hmm,
can't be mad at what's before me because what I created. Now, if you think about the survival mode, right?
mm-hmm.
In survival mode, you can't become a dreamer. It's hard to become a dreamer if I'm only just surviving. And
Yeah.
so what happens is where the limitation comes, God is, He says we're not limited. We can have what we can see. But if
Mm-hmm,
all I see is survival, right? Then I can't see outside of that. So then our grandparents and our mothers don't get to teach us how to take those risks with God, step out on that real faith, because it requires us to be able to see what we don't see. Take
mm-hmm,
some major risk on what we don't see. But it's also based on that relationship that you have with God too, because the more God shows me, I can trust Him and He provides, and we know He does. Because it's one thing back in the day we read the word and be like, you hear people say, "Oh, God will provide," But
Mhm.
does our actions really say that God will provide?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think in this instance is because they were constantly in survival mode, they're not seeing that access level that God has, that spiritual, you know what I'm saying, that divine level, right? That's taking
Mhm.
us into this next level of ourselves. And a lot of times when we're talking to them about that, they don't understand that because it was a constant survival, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. And I think I'll be honest, for me, girl, I got tired of being in survival mode. I mean, God do supply. Yeah, I've been there too. God will supply the needs. But after a while, I think you'd get fatigued because there's a stress in it, right? And maybe I didn't have the faith of my grandmother, so I'm not trying to put myself at that level. But at the same time, even though God would supply the needs in my life, I mean, girl, it would be at the last moment. I don't know about y'all, but it was never
Would you?
like, here's all that you need, before you about to get evicted. you know, um, it was always down to the wire. And I thank God, right? I
Right.
know the saints, I thank God now. But at the same time, does that kind of example by someone that influential, does it shade, as you said, right, your view as far as what can be achieved in life? Can you be a dreamer? Can you think that I can be even a millionaire, right? Forget millionaire, a thousandaire. How about that? you know, um, can I get past survival if that's all I've seen? If I've
Right.
all I've seen, and listen, I don't know about your grandmother, love, but my grandmother was like a giant in the faith to us, right? I mean, this was the tongue talking, demon casting out, healing, all of that, right? The Holy Ghost telling her stuff about us and all of that. She was a giant. And I still, even in death, revere her, right? The walk that she had with the Lord. And so, and I think that's why I kind of get to that, even unconsciously following her example because of the impact that she had in my life. And I think here in the South, especially, I don't know about other parts of the country, and in the Black community, especially, there's usually a woman that has that influence somewhere in our family, whether it's a grandmother or aunt or hell, even a godmother, right? I mean, these people, these women, and no shade about it. But I think it's time to have a discussion about, how that's impacting us. Another thing I'm going to throw in is that, because we're faith based, is that really the order? is that really
You
what
trying to
God
shake it
intended?
up.
Is that
Trying to-
really what God intended? And I know that there are situations, right? I know there are exceptions, right? I'm not look. I was a single mother. My husband died. I was forced to be a single mother, and I will say in my household, even as we're having this discussion, I probably held that role. Right? My parents were living with me, and I had to make decisions. I had to run things. I had to manage the household. Um, yeah, yeah. My dad was ailing, so not that no one had a voice, but definitely, yeah. But in general, let me get away from that. In general, right? As we talk about that matriarchal society, is that really the order that God intended?
So you threw a lot at me at one time. So I'm trying to address, the couple topics that you talked about. So I want to I'm gonna start first with the fact how you were speaking about the faith of your grandmother, right? Most of our grandmothers and those that took that leadership role, and even when you see it in movies like Big Mama and all these things, you see that person was a woman of strong faith.
Mhm.
What I'd like to challenge us on is not did she have faith, but did she have access? Okay, because I believe overflow comes in alignment, right? We
Okay.
can speak the scriptures, we can speak in tongues, swirl on our head, fall out, right? But if
Mhm.
I go home and I still can't feed my kids, right?
Yeah.
I'm barely making it.
Yeah.
And my father is the King of Kings, and he said he will supply not some of my needs, all of my needs. Did the way I exercise my faith give me the type of access I need so that I can be in agreement for financial overflow? That's just my thought. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not challenging anyone's faith. I'm not in a position to judge someone's faith. I'm
Mhm.
just saying that what I believe is that when our lives aren't giving the output or the prosperity or the provision that God speaks about in his word, then somewhere we're out of agreement.
Yeah.
Somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I also believe survival mode, in a sense, sometimes probably goes in antithetical to the fact that God's going to provide, right? Because
Yeah.
most of the times when we're in survival mode, we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure it out ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But is that saying I'm trusting God with it? Or is that saying I'm gonna do it, I can do it, I'm gonna figure this out, and hopefully God will show up? I believe he can do it, right?
Yeah.
Because we
Yeah.
say that, right? But
Yeah.
we still operate in survival mode. And I think in that sense, sometimes the survival mode, I believe, has limited God's hand in our lives because we are still trying to be in control. Also, the stress that comes from survival mode keeps us from being able to hear God clearly. I'm telling you, I know, like when lights is out, when you got enough gas to get to work and not get home, or no, better yet, I understand feeding the kids and not feeding yourself. Somebody said to me, well, what happens if you go? Like, you don't even think about it like that. You're like, I gotta provide for my kids, and if I don't eat, right?
Yeah.
But that's a byproduct of being in survival mode. But when God said he'll supply all our needs, then what am I missing? And that's the question that we have to ask ourselves. What's the ingredient in my faith that's missing so that I get that access? Okay, that's one thing I wanted to address that you talked about.
Okay.
In regards to when we talk about the order, we already know that if a woman's leading the house, that's not the order. Okay, we know God is called. Right now, Christ is the head of the church, right? And he's gonna bring a man in the house. If you are married, that man is the head, and it flows down that way. That's the flow. That's the order, right? Now, the issue is that many of us, as a single parent myself, have been forced to play both roles. Have been forced in some cases because and I say this very lightly, the men we've chosen refuse to take the position God has given them, right? It's not one that we inviting them into. No, this is the position that's in the word that God says is theirs, right? And
Yeah.
to lead the home, right? But that requires the women in the house to be able to, one, allow God to lead them to the man that can lead their household so that you can trust them enough to step back and allow God to speak to him. And through him, he will speak to you. But oftentimes, we don't marry people we trust. We marry people we can control.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's just I know this is probably real controversial. And if you think about the fact, it says the fall, it says the woman is always going to try to have rule over her husband, right? That is a natural effect of the fall. And so it takes a lot. We have to be very intentional about saying, let me step back. But where it starts is in our relationship with Jesus Christ.
Mhm.
Will I allow Christ to control all of the areas in my life? Not the ones I just dish out and I'm like, you can have that one. I got this one over here. You can have that one. It has
Yeah.
to start there. So our relationship with Christ will overflow into our relationship in the home, our relationship with God, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my thoughts. And I know that might
No, I think it's good. I mean, hey, these are opinions. These are our opinions, y'all.
These
So
are opinions.
everybody got
Okay.
one.
Don't no, listen,
But
everybody got an opinion. Okay.
but I like it because I think, and number one, we're faith based, right? We made
Yeah.
that pretty clear. That is the order. Okay, I know that people watching this, you may think that I don't agree with that and da 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 da. You don't have to, but I do think that when you said that word alignment, if we're not getting the results, then we're not in alignment, right?
Correct.
So you're right. Christ is the head, right? He's our savior. He's our Lord. If we're not getting the results, then maybe we're not in alignment, right?
Right.
If we're single, right? If we're
Right.
single, because if we don't have a husband, there's got to be, I hate to use this word because I feel like it's a bad word, the S word. If we don't, somebody said the B word, budget, but I think S is worse than that. The S word, submit.
Ah,
um yeah, and submit. I obviously I'm talking about submitting to God, right, and
right.
his guidance and direction for our life. I think that when we're single, and I can speak for me because I can be headstrong, I know that. I got that from my grandmother was headstrong. That part I know I took from her because once I get something in my mind, listen.
Like this is what's gonna be. This is what it's gonna be. Okay. Y'all either get in line.
Gosh. Look, this is what I see. I don't know. Anyway,
I don't know what
so
y'all see.
so with that in mind, right? With that as the preface, I think that there were times for sure, with even in my life, where I thought I knew that I didn't even ask God. I forget praying. I didn't even bring it to the throne, right? Because I already know the answer. Right. This is what we need to do. So what I need to ask about. Right. And I'm saying that facetiously, but that's the truth. Right.
Right.
That really is what pretty much would happen a lot of times. I would make the decision, it would mess up, and then I would pray. Lord,
If you get me out of this,
did I cry?
I
So
promise
so
I
I
won't do it again.
So I think, there is an order. I love that you use that word alignment because I think it is important. And I think that, we are still talking about, money, but we're also talking about order in our
Yes.
life. And if we don't have a husband, if you do have a husband, I'm gonna have to agree with love. There should be some, uh, I don't want to say it, but there should be some alignment. I like that word. Right?
It
There should
definitely
be
should be some
alignment
alignment, right?
with the husband, right? There should be some alignment. One of the things, even as a coach, when I talk to women that have a husband, and it's so funny because this is I always get the same answer. Because typically, when you're talking to a family about finances, you need both parties, both everyone that's in charge, right?
Right.
The husband and wife need to be part of the conversation. And I am not kidding. 95% of the time, oh, he's not gonna want to do this. He's not gonna get on the phone. He's not gonna talk. He doesn't want to talk about the money. He handles it. I handle it. Usually, and in my case, a lot of times it's the women that are handling the money. So
Mhm.
they feel like that to me
What
is
do you need to be here
usually
for?
yeah. So that, I know some people not gonna like this, but that to me is usually the first sign that okay, there's
Right.
an alignment problem.
Correct.
Right? Because we're not able to even have a conversation about the finances.
Right.
And so, and I think it goes back to, in my mind, as we're having this discussion, I'm tracing it back to that matriarchal society that we've kind of built in the
Right.
African American culture. That,
Right.
I know, bro, you don't know. I'm glad you're here, but I got this.
Right.
you know, and I think that's something, I just think that's something I want to have this conversation because I do think it's something that we need to really look at, talk about, think about in our own lives, how that affected us, how it still may be affecting us.
Right.
because I do think it's real.
So I will tell you a couple of things that, well, from the things that you have said that that triggered me is that because we have in some cases, especially single moms, and you find it a lot more in, in African American communities and families where we have a lot more, I'm saying, single moms. And I'm not taking away from single dads, those that fathers that are out there taking care of your kids. My hat is off to you
Mhm.
because it's not an easy job.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I will say is that you'll find that because we've had to be that way, we find strength. Like it's like we got to put on the that cape of strength, right? But the Bible says when we are weak, he is strong. And I believe submission becomes a lot easier in our life when we begin that submission, as I said before, with Christ. If we are not married, then he's our husband, right? And in all honesty, you know how when it says, and when you go to get married and say, who's that gives away this, this young lady, right?
Yep.
In all actuality, if I'm not married and he's my father, then if he ain't released me to you, then how do I know? Because if God is omniscient and he knows what he desires for you and who's the person he is set forth, right?
Mhm.
So I shouldn't make a move until God says, I release you to him. Then I know that everything I need and I can trust in is in him and I can relax. I don't have to be strong. To me, as the strong friend, the strong one all the time, I get tired of being strong. There is a time in my life where I wish somebody can come in and be strong for me. And so as a single person that's not married, right? Um, I have to work on that relationship there so that submission becomes easy. But at the same time, right? If I can't submit in this relationship with Christ, what's going to make God release his resources to me? It all goes back, right? He has to be able to trust being in relationship with me. And oftentimes we want God to release his resources, but we don't got the right relationship. We don't have a healthy relationship with the Father, who is the owner of all the resources. So we out of alignment with him. And because we out of alignment with him, everything else in our life is out of alignment. Our money, our relationships, our mind, out of alignment. And so we just got that's that first relationship. We get that first relationship right. And I believe everything is going to flow the way it needs to. And we'll be in agreement and we can get all that God has for us. Because as we talked about in your room, God loves us. He desires for us to have the riches that he has stored up for us. But a lot of times we don't get it because we focus on loving, ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We do. We focus on loving ourselves when the kingdom is not to say you don't love yourself, but it's about loving others and loving what God can do in you and through you. But if God can't trust that his plans can go through you, why would he release his resources to you? Just my thought.
Good. I love it. Yes, I think that's key, and I think that yeah, we have to be individuals that are able to get that purpose that's within us, right?
Yeah.
Executed in the earth, because that's what it's about. And yeah, and sometimes it does mean cutting off some things that maybe right were good for a season.
Right.
I'm thankful that I know how to survive.
Exactly.
Right. It did help me. It's that I knew how to do some things. I knew how to eat cheap, right? Learn how to cook enough meals that hey, if things get tight, I know how to cook a pot of beans now and some cornbread and some
And make it
rice.
stretch.
And I know, yes, I know, right? I don't care how expensive groceries get. I know some meals that I can cook that are cheap that will go a long way. And yeah, so the survival skills are necessary. And I think it's important for us. I know we've had kind of a tongue in cheek conversation some of the time today, but I definitely am appreciative, right, of the
Yes.
journey that I took. And I think it's important for all of us. Look, we have to appreciate the journey that we took, the people that God placed in our lives, the place, the family that we came through. All of these things are important. But at the same time, I think we all need to be challenged, as you said, to make it better, right?
Exactly.
To go greater, to go higher, right? To
Right.
improve on those areas. I don't want my children that they do know survival skills. They had no choice. But my little grand down there, I don't want her to start off having to learn survival skills. Can we
Yeah.
take it to the next level? Can
Yeah. Where
she?
we gonna get this Similac from?
Right, right. I mean, no, no. She needs to grow up understanding that, hey, how many, I got a house. How many other properties can I purchase? Right? It's time for her to be a landlord, a multi-unit owner, or something like that,
Right.
right? So I think that's what's important. And we have to have these type of conversations to really dissect our own family line and bloodline and determine what needs to be cut out. What am I still carrying with me? Right. I didn't realize I was still carrying some of those tendencies, until we really had this conversation. And, hey, I kind of am, you know what? I am like that woman. I'm doing some of that stuff. And yeah, I need to refine, right? It's just a refinement, right? It's not a cutting so much, but refining some of those practices so that I can get to my wealthy place. Because
I agree, Deb, and I think so. We're not taking nothing away from big mamas. What I mean, as single moms, what would we have done? Like my grandmother kept my son so I could go off to college, right?
mm,
So we're not taking away. That was that's I believe God does everything decent and in order. So He has everyone plays a part. So the
mm,
idea is that we're supposed to learn from our, what I'm saying, learn from our life,
yeah,
right? So our grandparents and our parents may have had limited access, right? But then you say, okay, all right, but I need to get even more access. So how I take what do I do with the knowledge they gave me to give me even more access? But the interesting part about it is if we learn it, we also inform back. A lot of times we always see wisdom is coming one way.
mm,
And so we don't question, you don't question grandma, you don't
yeah,
challenge their thinking, right? But the idea is now, the way the generations are now, that this birthing is two ways. We're trying to they're trying to give us some knowledge, but we also trying to give them some new knowledge, right? There's a new language with each level, with each generation. There's a new language and there's a new level of access.
yeah.
Just imagine if we learn it and then you go back and teach grandma or mama and they get breakthrough too. So
Come
the
on.
whole family
Yes,
gets
yes,
free.
yes. That's what I'm talking about. Yes. So
Yes.
that awesome. So awesome conversation. As we wrap up, I think the conversation has been great. I always love minding your money.
Hey,
It allows us to talk about so many things because you know what, you need your mind and money for everything. Everything comes into play, every topic, and it's important for us to keep moving forward. So as we close, love, what you got anything else you want to tell the people today?
I'm just going to tell them that it is important to have the right relationship with money, but the first relationship that you have to work on is also the relationship in your mind about money. Okay? Because like Deb is keeps saying, we got to go back to the root. The roots are the things that affect how we see money, right? And now, so I just believe that we need to go back, understand those roots so we can have the right relationship, so we can put money in the right perspective, right? So that we can see money as the partner that we've talked about. And yes, we'll be the controlling partner, as you said before, but in all actuality, it all belongs to God. So
Mm-hmm,
God is the controlling partner. So
mm-hmm.
let him help you get your mind right so that you can get access to the resources that he is already destined for you. Those are my thoughts.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks. Thank you, viewers, for joining us today. Listen, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, like, comment, share, right? Comment. Leave us some comments. Tell us about what your thoughts are about Big Mama and Medea now that were in your family. I'd love to hear them. And yes, until next time, right? Go have your most abundant day because we about to shut this down. All right. Have a good day, and we'll see you next time right here on the Mind of Your Money podcast.